Hey everyone. So apparently I cannot talk about this book without going on tangents. I'm gonna try very hard because the thing is I have trouble talking about this book without talking about the movies because they were my first exposure to the story of Anne of Green Gables. So I don't know, I'm gonna try to make this review organized, but anyway, this is gonna be a review of Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. Story time. I started this back in February, and at that point, I hadn't read it since I was little. Supposedly, I read it when I first bought it, when I was like 10. And I'm pretty sure I bought it because I'd seen the film on television, and I loved the film because PBS used to do these like fundraising things, and when I was younger, the films that they always showed during these fundraisers were the Anne of Green Gables films. So I think that's why I first bought the book. And I was 10, and ever since I can remember, the book has had this crease in it. But I don't remember actually reading it. I know this book was new when I bought it, so I know that this was not there. However, I have no memory of actually reading this book, so I don't know if maybe it fell down and the spine cracked and I'd never actually read it, or what. But all of my memories from when I was younger about this story were from the films. So, finally, in February, I picked it up again because I needed to read it. I did. I was supposed to read it last year because, sadly, Jonathan Crombie, who played Gilbert Blythe in the films, died last year of a brain aneurysm or hemorrhage or something. And he was very young, and it made me very sad, so it made me want to read the books, and then I just kept putting it off, and then finally, in February, I got around to it. I had to pause mid-February because the audiobook was due back at the library, so then, finally, like 2 weeks ago, I was able to finish it, because no one had the audiobook on hold, and so I got it out, and I finished it, and I just finished this yesterday morning, and oh my goodness. Going into this back in February, I was very worried because my love of the films, at least the first two and somewhat the third one, is so dear that I was afraid the book would not live up to the grand expectation of this story that I have from the films. And luckily it did. I loved this so much. The things that I loved about it more than the films, or like why I think it's better, is because we get so many more stories in this that we don't get. I would say the film is mostly true to this, but they do have to cut out some scenes from the film because, the book is 300 pages long. And then also we get so many more kind of side stories with the side characters, and we get to know the side characters so much more than you do in the films. So that's one thing that I really liked, is basically you just get so much more in the book, which, is understandable because that's usually how it is with books. Unless, of course, it's the film adaptation of Benjamin Button, in which case you get so much more in the film. But anyway, so yes, that's one of the reasons why I love this. And then the main reason is because of Ellen Montgomery's writing. Reading this, when I started, I would read her writing and I would think, this is just so rich, but people just don't talk like this. Like, did they talk like this back then? I don't know. And it was one of those things where you think people don't talk like this, but then your second thought is, I really wish they did. And, getting to know the character of Anne and getting to know her backstory in the book, you really understand why Ellen Montgomery uses such rich, extravagant language in all of her descriptions, in the dialogue, because the story is from, I think the term is third person limited, so it's third person, but it's Anne's perspective, and so you get all of these descriptions that are so like, the vocabulary is so rich. And, you know, it makes it so that you can just picture everything so clearly. And it's because we're seeing the world through Anne's eyes, and she has such a great imagination because from the time she's born until she is 11, when she goes to live at Green Gables with Matthew and Marilla, and that's not really a spoiler because it happens within the first, like, couple chapters. But up until that point, she's had a really crappy life. Like, she has lived in all these different foster homes, and none of her foster parents actually care about her. They've basically just taken her in to play nursemaid and nanny to all of their other children, and it's just really sad, and she's very lonely, and that's why she has this rich imagination, because otherwise, like, she wouldn't really be able to get through life. And luckily, when she gets to Green Gables, she still has that rich imagination, but it kind of becomes a little bit tamer because she no longer has to imagine having a happy life. She does have a happy life, which is great. But yeah, that's the thing that I love so much about this book, is that because of that character, well, because of her character and also just because of Montgomery's style, her writing is just so rich and gorgeous, and the language she uses is beautiful. And that's actually what made me realize that I not only want to finish the Anne books, but I also want to continue on with every story that she's published, if I can. And next, I guess I'll talk about characters. My favorite character in this book of all time is definitely Matthew Cuthbert. He is wonderful. He is Anne's foster father. He and Marilla Cuthbert are brother and sister, and they adopt her and bring her up. And Matthew, I don't know, it's, okay, my first obvious introduction to Matthew was with the films, because, as I said, I hadn't read this when I was super young, or if I did, I don't remember it. And I mean, I bought the book because I'd seen the film, so regardless, I saw the film first. But anyway, so my first introduction to his character was Richard Farnsworth's portrayal of him in the film. I think his first name is Richard. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. But he also played the sheriff in Misery, that dude. And it's funny because the characters are so totally different. But anyway, so his portrayal of the character is so sweet and wonderful. And luckily, in the book, you realize he's the exact same, which just shows how spot on this cast was for the film. But his portrayal of Matthew, and then Anne's portrayal, Megan Follows' portrayal of Anne in the film, and then their interactions and portrayal of the relationship between Anne and Matthew was just so wonderful, and it really reminded me of my grandfather. I wouldn't say the entirety of Matthew's character reminds me of my grandfather, because they definitely had very different personalities, but mostly it was the relationship between Matthew and Anne that very much reminded me of the relationship between me and my grandfather, and I think that's why I love Matthew's character so much. His character is just wonderful and fantastic, and then Marilla is really interesting. I really like the relationship between her and Anne. She's one of those characters where sometimes you're just like, oh my gosh, you're being so stubborn, like, stop it. But you really do end up liking her. And then same with, like, I love Gilbert. Gilbert is amazing, and he is probably my second favorite character in the whole thing. And then Diana Barry, and Mrs. Lynde is very interesting, because Mrs. Lynde is a character that I love to be annoyed by. Like, it's kind of like that thing where the character you love to hate, but I don't hate her, I just find her very annoying, and, like, she's kind of fun to laugh at because of how, like, meddlesome she is. So, yeah, that's how I feel about her. Other characters, I can't stand Josie Pye, as we're not supposed to. And what I really like about the book is that when I said we get to know a lot of the side characters better, in the film, you really don't get to know the characters of, like, Moody Spurgeon and Charlie Sloane and Jane Andrews and Ruby Gillis well at all, including there's a side plot with one of the side characters that it's not in this book. I actually found out that it's in either Anne of Avonlea or Anne of the Island, I'm not sure which, but I actually found out about that storyline from Green Gables Fables, which is the literary web series that's a modern adaptation of Anne of Green Gables, and it actually just ended. But anyway, they are incredibly faithful to the books, and there is an entire side plot that's actually pretty significant. It's a pretty significant thing that also happens involving Anne, or at least, like, it involves one of her close friends, and so it's a pretty significant thing that happens in her life. And that is actually entirely cut out of the films, which really made me sad because in Green Gables Fables, you can tell that it's a very big part of the books, and I didn't know that because I hadn't, like, I have only just finished this, so I didn't know, and I was like, that's kind of weird that the book would not, I mean, that the film wouldn't include that. Like, to me, it was very strange that the film, the scriptwriters didn't consider that to be important enough. And I'm not going to say what character it involves or what happens because that's a huge spoiler. But yeah, I was very kind of disappointed in that, even though I still love the films. But yeah, we just don't really get to know any of the characters like that in the film. So I was very happy that we got to know so much more about them in the story. Like, you know, I really like the character of Jane Andrews and also Ruby Gillis in the book much more than the film, and I don't really know about the boys as much. I kind of I liked getting to know the boys a little bit more in the book, but I can't say that I ended up liking I guess I liked Moody a little bit more, but as far as Charlie Sloane went, I can't say that I liked him any more in the book than I did in the film. Although there is another kind of little more side plot with him that happens in the book that you don't find out about in the film. So yeah, I really liked getting to know a lot of the side characters more. And one thing that I find interesting with the film is that they switch around some dialogue, where it actually ends up having a different impact in the film than it does in the book. But most of the time, I liked it better in the film, and I think it's just because maybe I saw it first. So to me, it makes less sense the way some of the scenes happen in the book. And then another thing that I really liked that the film did is they, what they do is, like, okay, there can be 3 chapters in here where 3 different things happen to Anne. And then, what they'll do is they will combine elements of those 3 chapters where everything that happens will still happen, but they'll just happen either quicker or they'll just kind of mesh them together so that it would take 5 minutes of the movie instead of 15. So I thought that that was a really good way for them to still be true to the book, but also save time. And what else? In the book, I just love all the scrapes that Anne gets into. There's a lot of them, so I'm trying to think of ones that wouldn't be spoilery. Like, she basically is afraid of, like, she's terrified of failing geometry. She thinks that if she fails geometry, she'd rather the world just not go on, which I think is just really funny. Of course, the scene where she meets Gilbert is one of the most famous... The scene where she meets Gilbert is probably the most famous thing that happens in this story and in the film. And there's another situation with her hair that happens that's really funny, and the situation where she plays the Lily Maid, and just all the things. And, you know, I have all of these tabs in here, not only because of how gorgeous Ellen Montgomery's language is, but because of how much I loved all of these scenes that I've loved so much in the film. And to be honest, I think I actually like that I saw the film first, because I really love that, to me, these actors are the characters. So every scene in here, practically, I was picturing it the same way that it was said or done in the film, and I really love that. So yeah, I completely loved it. And there is one thing that happens towards the end of this that every time I watch it in the film, I cry. Every single time. And actually, it was weird. The other day, my mom and I were watching the first film, and we watched half of it, and then she ended up having to go to bed, because it's a 3-hour-long film, so you would have to spend all night watching it. So we paused it, and then the next day, I continued on without her while she was at work, because I thought she didn't care about finishing it. Like, I thought she was just watching it because I was watching it. And then when she got home, she was like, no, I need to see this. So I was like, okay. So we rewound it, watched it again. I had already seen this scene when I watched it like earlier that morning, and I had cried then. And then rewatching it with my mother, I cried. And then when I listened to it in the audiobook and here, I cried. So I cry over this one thing that happens in the book pretty much every time I see it, or in this case, read it or listen to it. It's one of the most emotional parts of the book. I don't want to say what happens, but oh my gosh, the idea that it has that kind of effect on me every single time just shows what an amazing storyteller Lucy Maud Montgomery is. And I'm so excited to go into Anne of Avonlea. And there are just so many things, so many other things that I want to say, but I feel like if I say anything else, it's going to be spoilery, for things that happen. But yes, this is one of my favorite books, I think, ever, and I'm so excited to reread it after I finish the rest of the series. And 5 out of 5 stars, just wonderful magicness. It's wonderful. So yes. Okay, so that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry this kind of was a little bit rambly and a little bit movie book mashup review. That's what I'm going to call this. Let me know if you've read it. Let me know if you love it. If you haven't read it, please do, because it's amazing. And also, if you haven't seen the films, I highly recommend the first 2, and I sort of recommend the third one. If you really like the first 2, and you don't care if the third one goes off from the books and has an entirely different timeline, then do watch it, because I actually really love it as a film. I just don't like it as an adaptation of these. So yeah, just treat it like it's an entirely different creature, animal thing. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.